guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. Could a return to Inter Milan be on the cards for one Romelu Lukaku this summer? That is the question we are asking this morning, because the rumour mill has been generating and snowballing around Romelu Lukaku. Obviously, his time at Chelsea hasn't exactly panned out the way many people, including myself, of course, expected. We all expected the Belgian striker to return to the Premier League and return with a bang, feast on plenty of goals and take Chelsea to that next level. But of course, it hasn't panned out that way. His big move last year from Inter Milan to Chelsea, I know it feels like yesterday we were talking about this saga, only the opposite way around, of Chelsea wanting to buy Lukaku from Inter and Lukaku wanting to return to Stamford Bridge. Well, fast forward a year later, we're talking about it happening the other way around, because it seems that Lukaku is wanting to return to Inter. We've known that for a while. We knew ever since the interview that he conducted in December that this is kind of what he was alluding to and wanting, and that maybe his return to Chelsea and Stamford Bridge was a mistake. It hasn't panned out the way many people expected it to pan out, and now we come to this point where there's got to be a decision made by Chelsea on Lukaku. Inter Milan are seemingly interested in taking him back. Chelsea seemingly want to get rid of him. Whether a deal can be worked out or not obviously remains to be seen. But before we get into talking about more of this in a little bit more detail, I want to talk about the story behind it and why things may have gone wrong for Lukaku at Chelsea. I would like to remind you to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new or want to see more content like this. Both things are always and very greatly appreciated. But for now, let's get into this story, because it's a very interesting one for obvious reasons. Lukaku's been around for a while. He's 29 years old, big Belgian striker, obviously, big reputation over in Serie A. Started off very well in the Premier League as well, even with when he was on his loan spell from Chelsea to West Brom. He kind of hit the ground running there, and he did very well at Everton, of course, and then Chelsea just wasn't to be. Went to Manchester United, obviously. It just didn't work out. The older that he's got and the more he's progressed in the Premier League, it just hasn't worked out. But then obviously going to Inter Milan was a massive change for him. It really seemingly was the making of him as to being this mature, prolific, consistent goal scorer. And that's kind of what enticed people into believing that Lukaku would change, because yeah, Lukaku would still score goals in the Premier League, but there was always question marks about his overall play, his build-up, his attitude, this, that, the other. There was always question marks surrounding Lukaku about his overall gameplay. But when he was in Serie A, things seemed to calm down. Maybe that was the Antonio Conte effect, being at Inter Milan, being a proper marine general kind of manager. He's gonna drill in as much as he can his knowledge and his philosophy and his style of play into every single member of that squad until he runs them into the ground. And maybe that kind of had an effect on Lukaku, to where he did straighten up and he did look like he was firing on all cylinders, and it kind of tricked people in a way into thinking that this was a much different Romelu Lukaku to what we'd seen in the past, and this was going to be a Lukaku that was going to be fit and firing and taking Chelsea to where they wanted to be, which was for challenging for the big trophies again. But like I say, at Chelsea, it just didn't pan out the way we expected. Now, in regards to this story, it's understood that Lukaku wants a move back to Italy. He's open to the move back to Serie A and to Inter Milan. Inter are open to taking him back, but the finances just aren't there. We know about Inter Milan's financial issues from the past few years. We know that obviously last year they had to sell a few of their best players, including Lukaku, of course, to accommodate for their financial issues. Antonio Conte left because of the financial backing that he wasn't going to be receiving from Inter for a large part. But they still seem interested in taking him back nonetheless. And obviously, things can obviously change with that. Whether it's Inter Milan, they shift out a few players to accommodate the funds to get Lukaku, or maybe they go for some sort of loan option initially and then with an option to buy or something along them lines. But either way, I genuinely believe that if this move is to materialize in whatever way, shape or form, this will be the best for everybody involved, I think. It's clear that it hasn't worked out. I've said that a few times already in this video. It's clear that the promise and the excitement that this transfer last year created ultimately has failed to live up to the hype. Obviously, everybody was looking forward to Lukaku back in the Premier League because, like I say, it seemed like he had changed. It seemed like he was going to be more prolific in front of goal. He was going to be an absolute monster in front of goal. And although it may have started promising, he was starting to find his feet again in the Premier League, scored a few goals here and there. An injury and a COVID case and all kinds of other issues like that kind of sparked a string of poor performances thereafter. And it was kind of, and it all kind of came to a head when obviously that interview came out in December. That was kind of what I believe to be the beginning of Chelsea's sort of downfall. Not a complete nosedive, obviously, but the kind of nosedive that saw them not challenge anymore for the top two. Not challenge Liverpool or Manchester City. It was a kind of nosedive that saw them comfortable in top four for a while and then sort of just stay there and stagnate for a while across the season. And then kind of towards the end, of course, they kind of fell into a little bit of a concerning top four race where there was a fear that they could have actually missed out, but they did manage to hold their nerve in the end and obviously claim victory and claim a top four position in that regard. So it wasn't completely downfall, but at the same time it was kind of a stagnating point to where Lukaku just didn't take them to where they needed or wanted to be. Didn't obviously help himself in that interview. Obviously he said some things that were pretty poor and some pretty slightly disrespectful things, I guess, toward the Chelsea faithful, the Chelsea fans, and to obviously the Chelsea hierarchy that took a chance on signing him back. And like I say, from there, that's where things began to fall apart completely for Lukaku and fall apart a little bit for Chelsea across the season. He did redeem himself a little bit in the Club World Cup, being the main star of the show over there, where he obviously helped bring back that Club World Cup championship to Stamford Bridge, but he never really found his form from there on afterwards. Clearly, something was not right. I don't know what it was exactly, because when you look at the entire formula that Thomas Tuchel's created at Chelsea, all of those attacking players, the likes of Mason Mount, Hakim Ziyech, Kai Havertz, Christian Pulisic, Timo Werner, N'Golo Kante to an extent, Jorginho, Reece James, Ben Chilwell, all of those things just sort of screamed that all of that talent and quality and supply all around Lukaku would make him feast on goals this season, and he would be one of, if not the top goal scorer in the Premier League. But it just obviously hasn't worked out like that. I do think it's a mixture of possibly Lukaku not fitting in with a Thomas Tuchel system. I also think there's a large part down to Lukaku's attitude and his work rate and not being up to the standard and not being up to scratch that is needed to play for Chelsea. But for 100 million, you do expect him to have more goal contributions, more assist contributions than what he managed to record this season. He managed to record 8 goals and 1 assist in the Premier League this year. He scored 15 goals overall in 44 appearances in all competitions. He was meant to be the guy to bridge the gap to the likes of Liverpool and Manchester City, take them to that challenging point of the Premier League and obviously big competitions across the board as well. And obviously it hasn't happened. Inter, meanwhile, they lost the Serie A title to their fierce rivals AC Milan, but when you consider that they, at the beginning of the season, lost a few of their big and key players, including Lukaku, of course, and of course lost their manager in Antonio Conte, I would say they did pretty well to recover and only finished 2 points behind their fierce rivals. I remember at the time of Lukaku's signing last season, the Inter CEO Giuseppe Marotta claiming that Lukaku's replacement in Edin Dzeko, who arrived on a free transfer there, was not that different to the Belgian striker in terms of everything that he can produce on the pitch, which was a pretty sly jab, in all honesty, and kind of strange now that I bring it up, and obviously they want him back. But you kind of have to feel like maybe he did have a slight point. Maybe there was a slight point to that, and obviously I know Lukaku is slightly younger than Dzeko. He's 29 now, Lukaku, like I said earlier. So maybe just seeing out the rest of his career, the rest of these few years, whatever else he's got left in Italy is not necessarily a bad thing for him. Maybe not a bad thing for Inter Milan in terms of maybe getting a big star back that obviously helped them to win the Serie A title for the first time in 10 years. Big name, even though obviously he's kind of flopped at Chelsea. Big name player, boosting shirt sales, merchandise, all that kind of stuff. Maybe it might help Inter Milan in that kind of aspect as well. Because look, it was no secret that in Italy, in Serie A, in Inter Milan, Lukaku was a success. He scored 64 goals for Inter Milan in 95 appearances and obviously helped guide them to their first Serie A title in 10 years. Obviously, the Serie A league is a different league. It's slightly slower. It's less intense than the Premier League. He thrived out in Italy, though. You still have to make do with what you've got. And obviously, he thrived out in Italy. And that's where this whole narrative came into play. This whole coming back to Chelsea, having unfinished business there. And this was about him being like, I left a boy and I'm returning a man. And this is now my unfinished business redemption story. And it just never kicked on like that. He never reached those heights of he was ever going to redeem himself for obviously what people in this country know him as, which is his first touch is terrible, his hold-up play is poor, and although he can be good on his day and he can be a real physical handful, his work rate and his attitude sometimes just lets him down. And that's kind of what we've seen again. We saw kind of what we saw at Manchester United with him at Chelsea under Thomas Tuchel this time. That's kind of what I saw anyway, and I think a lot of people did see that as well. I think, like I say, it will be easy for him to return to Italy. He knows the league obviously very well, and knows Inter, and I think, like I say, it's a league that may be better suited and more adapted to his style of play and everything. And I think there is a deal to be made here. I think there is a deal that will come off this season. I think it will be good for all parties. I think it will be good for Chelsea to get him off the books. And sometimes you do need to cut your losses in this kind of situation. And I think that will be the best thing to happen for Chelsea by all accounts. I think that Chelsea need to kind of rebuild and redeem themselves again. And I think getting rid of what has become a slightly toxic influence in Lukaku, I believe, is going to be a good start and has to start somewhere for Thomas Tuchel. And I think that would be a good move by all accounts. And obviously for Lukaku to return to Inter would be a good move for him, a league he's better suited to and obviously knows very well. And for Inter, as I previously mentioned, it could be good to have a big name player back within their ranks, and obviously a player that helped them so much during his time there, although be it a short time there, it was still a pretty successful one at that. The financial situation obviously does present a question mark or two over whether this deal can go through. Obviously, Inter's financial situation has been reported that they can't possibly afford a permanent deal. But like I say, I would expect some sort of loan deal to be put in place initially, and then with some sort of option or mandatory buy clause in there as well. Possibly somewhere down the line, maybe within the next 1 or 2 years or something, because 2-year loan deals seem to be on the rise now in previous years. So there is a lot of layers to this story. There's a lot of things to kind of look into and digest. Like I said, I can't believe that this signing for Chelsea hasn't worked out. When you look at the attacking talent that Chelsea have, and you look at Lukaku as the kind of player that he can be and where he's at his best, it's hard, honestly, to believe that this didn't work out the way that everybody, or a lot of people, including myself, had seen it working out. I genuinely thought this was going to be the final piece in this Chelsea and Thomas Tuchel jigsaw that saw Chelsea bridge the gap on Liverpool, bridge the gap on Manchester City, and actually challenge for the Premier League title. But just hasn't worked out that way. And it was actually a season in which Chelsea were, solid and consistent within the top 4 race, but at the same time didn't challenge and almost fell out the top 4 race. And it was kind of a weird situation for Chelsea. I know that obviously they had a lot of off the pitch issues, and I think Thomas Tuchel deserves a lot of credit for trying to handle it as best he could I think he said too much at times at various points, but at the same time, he was left to front it all out. He was the one that was left to front it all out with possible no guidance or no kind of, you can say this, but you can't say this. You can say that, but you can't say this. That kind of thing. So I think that he deserves a lot of credit. In terms of Lukaku, clearly not worked out, but maybe, just maybe, this potential deal could work out for everybody involved, every party involved. I think it'll be good for Chelsea, it'll be good for Lukaku, and it'll be very good for Inter Milan to get Lukaku back. For Chelsea, of course, new owners coming in, they need to hit the ground running. They need to go out and make a statement, in my opinion, to try and get the fans on side. Obviously, there's a lot of things up in the air at Chelsea. This could be a big indication of where Chelsea do go. I think this will be a big move to cut their losses if they are to just let him go. I think it will also be an interesting move in the follow-up to this, in the aftermath, if they do let him go, as to who they bring in extra. But like I say, Inter Milan could be about to welcome the return of Romelu Lukaku to their club in the near future. Romelu Lukaku could be on his way back to Serie A, to Inter Milan this summer, but we'll have to wait and see whether that all comes to fruition or not. It's going to be a very interesting summer ahead, none more so than for Chelsea, Romelu Lukaku and Inter Milan in terms of this story. But of course, these are just the thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, whatever you want to call it, of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of this Romelu Lukaku situation? Like I say, it only seems like yesterday we were talking about this happening the other way with Lukaku returning to Chelsea. What do you make of it in the present day with Lukaku possibly returning to Inter Milan? I'd love to know your thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, whatever you want to call it, down below in the comment section. I'm sure it'll make for interesting reading. Otherwise, hit that like button on the way out if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new and want to see more content like this. Both things are always and forever be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video, and I will see you all again soon in another video.